We are back. It is July 17th, Friday, and the Find Me in Seattle podcast is back on the air. The last episode that I did here was April, I believe, 27th, and I know I recorded a couple episodes when I got back from Thailand with Amanda, and I can't believe we're May, June, 3 months later now that I haven't recorded a show. And for the last couple of weeks, I have been just trying to get myself in a place to record the show. Like, what was I going to talk about? What do I get into? The world is so different, I feel like, from when we last talked to each other. And we didn't talk to each other. You listened to me talk, into this microphone. And as I'm saying that out loud, though, it's changed for sure. But I got to remember that April 27th, the world was pretty crazy back then. So it wasn't that different. However, the episodes that I did after getting back from Thailand were very different from the episodes that I was doing before I went to Thailand, which seemed to have a lot more structure and organization and focus about what I'm going to do here at Find Me in Seattle and what's the goal of the podcast. And the goal of the podcast was to give an audio version of recommendations and places and updates about the city from my perspective in as non-political way as I possibly could, but just to talk about the food scene and community and the things that are going on that I find interesting, and then speak to the platform that I'm creating here at Find Me in Seattle. And I want to get back to that. In the last 3 months, I've just been doing a lot of thinking and contemplating, writing down a bunch of different notes about what I want this to be and where I want it to go, and we'll get to that. So first, let's talk about, I actually have some questions written down, you guys. This maybe is the first time that I've done this on the podcast, but the first question I put down is, where have I been, and why did I stop recording the podcast in April? And that really comes down to a sincere lack of motivation and drive and interest in really a lot of the things that I was doing here at Find Me in Seattle. I think I was so overwhelmed first with COVID-19 and all the drama that is going on with the current global pandemic. And that was hard to swallow in itself. And then the beginning of June with the murder of George Floyd and all the protests that happened, right? Amanda and I were so glued to those live streams watching the protests, especially early on here in Seattle with the umbrellas and taking over of the East Precinct in Capitol Hill. A lot of it just became very overwhelming for me, and I didn't know how to express myself in the right way with everything that's going on, with a mix of, I didn't really feel like it was my place to be talking about it. It seemed like, there were a lot of important voices out there and voices that needed to be heard, and I felt uncomfortable putting my voice out there. And that was across the board. That was on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and here on the podcast. And so I really went into my shell, and on Instagram, I kept going and I tried to put a focus on Black-owned businesses and things going on in the city and try to talk about a little bit more about justice because it's stuff that I believed in. But at the same time, I've really lost a lot of the motivation to go out to local businesses and show those places off. And it seems like the last 3 months I've kind of just been in this cloud, which I assume almost every single one of you has been in that position. 2020 is going to go down as this really weird year, and there's so much that's happening right now. I mean, we're always living through history, but right now feels like it's going to be a time that is remembered forever. And I think we say that all the time with the current news cycle and all the craziness of everything that's happening. But right now, there's no denying that the world will reflect back on 2020 and how all the different countries around the world and leaders handled this situation, the global pandemic. And I think history is going to remember of how poorly we have done here in the United States, but then also with the civil unrest that has spanned globally. Black Lives Matter has completely shifted into, I would say, a generally accepted stance, and everyone agrees, and we're pushing forward and trying to make the world a better and equal place. And I've got to find out where I play a role in that, right? How I've tried to make a difference up to this point is by promoting these Black-owned businesses in Seattle, and I got to just continue to remember to promote all different types of businesses, no matter what. I mean, right before we went to Asia, I did this podcast, and it was all about the issues with businesses in the university district, and them not being supported, right? Because people were fearful of coronavirus, and that was just absolutely crazy. And so it's always changing, but supporting local businesses is kind of the whole cornerstone of what I'm doing here at Find Me in Seattle. So I'm going to continue to do that and find different ways to do that, and continually try to critique myself and evaluate myself, making sure I'm being fair and promoting a diverse background of businesses and trying new places. And that's kind of always the goal here at Find Me in Seattle. And so let's go back to the adjustments here in quarantine, because we're here for a while. It's not going away. There's no doubt the rest of 2020 is going to be very similar. It's all going to be recommended that we stay inside, that we physically distance ourselves from just about everybody. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when schools start back up here. We've got restaurants and bars and lots of businesses opening now, but social events are all put off. Sports obviously are all put off, and it's time to just become very familiar and create our new routines. And that was one of the reasons this week I was really saying, like, Friday, you're going to record the show. You're going to record the show on Friday, because I have completely had to re-establish all of the routines that I've fallen out of. From my primary routine is posting on Instagram. I've been trying my hardest to keep it up, and I've been doing a good job for the most part of doing that every day. It's been a challenge to figure out what am I going to talk about if I'm sitting at home every day. And then creating at least one YouTube video a week and doing this podcast every week, which ends up being a second video. Shout out to all you here watching on YouTube. And creating these routines are so important for all of us right now. And so I highly encourage you to evaluate the things that you're doing in the morning and in the evening and everywhere in between, and how that is affecting your day every day. And so the one thing that Amanda and I have established here since we've been doing it for a couple months now. I don't know when we really established it, but it must have happened in June, and we just call it morning hugs. And the first thing we do when we're both out of bed and got our eyes open and we're walking around, before we talk about anything or say anything or even make our coffee, we just give each other a hug, right? And it's kind of become this great way to anchor the morning and start the day with showing each other the physical connection that is so desperately needed right now, that I think it's just become a reminder. We don't get that physical interaction with just about anybody anymore. So establishing that connection between her and I has become very important, and it's something her and I really look forward to every morning. It's something that is I hate to say that the morning hug is one of the highlights of my day, but it really has become that. And it's just something really small that I think has continued to grow our connection and remind us of the partnership that we have and everything. So creating these routines and these patterns are very important. When it comes to Find Me in Seattle, it's still on the calendar. Go and support all these businesses and try to create content to promote them, because I still very much believe that supporting these businesses is more important than ever. I had this weird confusion, especially when the Black Lives Matter protest was happening, about where does Find Me in Seattle kind of fit within the universe, because with all of these issues happening all at once right now, going and supporting all these local businesses, I think, is more important than ever. And what is the right way to show them and keep supporting them and telling their story? I do feel on the inside that it has created even more potential for what I'm building here, which is exciting, but it just comes down to the motivation in actually doing that. And that has been the part that I've struggled with. So how I've been thinking about it is just every week I'm trying to create new little patterns that can get me back into routine. And I think the routine got so thrown off for me because we went to Asia for 2.5 weeks. We came back early, and then we were on that jet lag quarantine for 2 weeks. And then everything was thrown off from there, and I didn't really work on establishing new principles for creating a routine. And mostly, maybe that came from me not understanding where the world was going to go and what was going to happen, and maybe just assuming that maybe I'm going to get back to waking up every morning, going to a local coffee shop, riding the bus to see my clients, going around the city and kind of spending all day outside like I was used to. And now it's very obvious that's not happening. And so it's trying to find all these new things. I mean, my life is so much different, as is, I'm sure, every single one of you. It's so much different than it was in the beginning of the year. And I'm trying to just stay positive about it. I'm like laughing at myself thinking about just how crazy it is. And I just keep reminding myself how grateful I am to have a place to live, have Amanda by my side, be relatively healthy. The health of my family right now is very important to me. And so I'm chalking all those up to the biggest victories that I can get, and everything else is just a win. But we don't really know where everything else is going and how it's going to change. And I wanted to get back to documenting that. My last 2.5 years, all the content that I've created was really a documentary about me and how I'm experiencing things. And I always talk about how I'm creating all this content so that not only can I go back in 10, 20 years and look at these things, but also I want my children to go back and watch all these things. So to my future children who may be going back and listening to this, I love you. And this is for you, so you can understand who I am and who I was and who Amanda was and what we did and the life that we had and the, who we were. Because I always think about, I think about legacy a lot. And I always think about my parents. I'm 31 years old. When my parents were 31, I think they had 5 children by then. They lived a very different life, right? I just got married at 31, and children are starting to become a new thought and priority and life event that's going to come up. But to think about who they were when they were 31 and comparing it to me is so different. And I don't really have the content to know who they were. So I create a lot of this stuff hoping that one day my children would be 31 and they can go back and look at this and be like, oh, like that's who they were. And they weren't these, grumpy old parents that maybe we will become. I'm not really sure what we will become. And, but that's fun. And so that's, the part of this welcome back episode right now. And yeah, hopefully you can guys keep me accountable for the very few people who listen to the show every week or watch it on YouTube. And yeah, just learning about different topics and understandings. I'm working on a few really interesting projects with a few friends that are video kind of conversations so we can support each other and talk about the growth that we're going through, because we probably will never experience another year like this with so much going on. And I think it's so important right now to be documenting that process and have the opportunity to reflect on everything that's going on. I have all these topics that I want to talk about here, but I'm not really sure we should get into them. They're a little bit about rants. Let's talk about coronavirus, things that are going on right now. There's a lot of civil discourse, maybe it's not civil, about masks. This is crazy that we're even having this discussions about masks. Where I stand is masks are about selflessness, right? It's about understanding that this is taking care of your community and the people around you. And it's really, this debate has really shown me a lot about America, right? And we're not really sure about where the line is, because with social media, it's easy to spot out what we like to call the Karens and the Kevins now, as the people rejecting it. I'm not really sure how many people are actually rejecting the thought of wearing a mask. It could just be what we see on the media and it be extreme. But even if 10 million of the 300 million Americans, right, which is a very small percentage, are doing that, it's still a lot of people who are going out against it. But when we were in Asia, this is when we learned. It's funny, when we bought masks before we went to Asia, the masks we thought we were buying them to protect ourselves. And when we were in Asia in early March, it was like, oh, the masks, everybody wears the masks because they're taking care of each other and they all care about the community and they all come together to solve these social and public health issues. And we still haven't gotten that here in America. So when we got back to America, it was very easy for Amanda and I to continue wearing the masks. And it's interesting that we're now in the middle of July and the masks are starting to become a normal thing. And we have big stores like Walmart requiring that you wear a mask. But 4 months later, it's like, wow, this is so late. We could have done this so long ago and it would have made such a big difference, and now it's not. And that really comes down to leadership. I think we're learning a lot about leadership. I'm personally learning a lot about leadership because I have ambition to, be in a leadership position and have a voice and, lead people into the future. And it's really shocking to see when leaders choose to not wear the mask specifically, how many people follow that direction and maybe follow it blindly or with the research that's out. Obviously, there's a lot of research. For me, it just seems obvious that this virus is spreading because of the molecules that are coming out of our mouth. And so why not put something over your mouth to prevent as many of those potential viruses coming out of your mouth? It just really makes a lot of sense to me, and people are up in arms that it's, propaganda or it's about control. It's really not. This is just about caring about people. And what this has shown about America is part of our cultural fabric is that we value ourselves more than our community. And that's a scary thing. And a lot of the stuff that we've created in America, that makes sense. I can see why that's happened, but I think it's really unfortunate. It's really sad, and it's punching us right in the face, and hopefully something will change about that. But as a society, we've needed to grow in our empathy and our understanding and our caring for other people. And maybe this is just a way of the world saying, this is what you get and you deserve it. And hopefully we'll all come out of this and there'll be something that grows from it and we'll be better for it. And next time a virus does come around, I think the mask up will happen really quickly. We've seen in Taiwan, in Japan, countries that have experienced similar situations like this, how quickly their country reacted, either shut everything down, required everyone to put on masks, social distancing, and so many people followed the rules. It'll be interesting when this happens again, if we move faster, but I think that will come down a lot to who's in the leadership and the directives and which direction we go. And yeah, it's crazy time. It's unfathomable to think what's happened to the world and where we are and how this has all gone down. It's definitely not avoidable, but we could have done a much better job. And now it's, we are prepared for, they kept talking about second wave. Second wave was in the fall, and we never even flattened the curve for the first wave. As far as countrywide, I think some states have done a good job and it's gone up and down. And I hope we can get through this. But I'm going to try to be here for the show so I can walk us through that second wave. I, regret that I wasn't here for the first wave to talk about our experiences sitting in our house and what shows we were watching. And I'm going to do a better job at talking about all that stuff here moving forward. And hopefully every Friday I can get back on the microphone and record the show. I definitely want to get back to the featured meal of the week and promoting all the local businesses again, because I think that is the most important thing that I do here with my work. And so I'm not going to do that this week because I just wanted to give a check-in, but I promise next week in the show, we will start getting some categories and some topics in some conversations, and hopefully I can get some motivation and start maybe getting some guests on here. Definitely going to get Amanda back on the show. Amanda and I have been talking about doing a conversation about everything that's been going on for a while, and we've really dropped the ball in this, so this is also part of the motivation. It was like, all right, if I record this one and I get it going and I can get routine going, I can also get Amanda back in the process. And because she's the real star of the show, and I know all of you guys really want to hear from her. And yeah, I guess the one thing related to her, check out her art at Coca Amley, because she has been very, very artistically driven this week, and have been making these really cool portraits with her iPad and different photos. And yeah, go check her out and hit her up there on Instagram if you have any art ideas that you want her to create for you. Thank you very much for watching the show. Welcome back. Thank you for letting me in your ears and on your monitors. And I appreciate you guys for listening, joining in. Let me know if you have any topics or suggestions or things you want to hear about specifically from me, and I'll make sure to work those into next week. Thank you very much. Welcome back, and we'll see you soon.